Hi, I'm Lorenzo Zullo from 3, and I'm very excited to moderate a roundtable on best practices on sustainability approaches and experiences. We'll cover a broad range of topics, from supply chain transparency, sustainability assessment, corporate commitment, and the balance between risk versus hazard-based chemicals management. We have a great expert panel which will provide into the debate different views from industries, investors, and NGOs, sharing real-world challenges and solutions. I'm looking forward to an engaging discussion, which will uncover actionable insights for a sustainable future.
I'm Beth Uhlhorn, Director of Product Safety and Compliance at Dow, and I'm looking forward to sharing Dow's journey as part of the conversation on best practices on sustainable approaches and experiences. Reporting, regulations, and increased societal calls for transparency are all shaping our approach. And I'm looking forward to diving in on some of the challenges and opportunities we see here as we discuss areas like hazard and risk-based approaches and the best way to communicate along the value chain.
Hi, my name is Carina and I'm responsible for sustainability in BYK. Sustainability is and remains a multifaceted and complex topic. Therefore, it makes sense to define small work packages to cover different topics. Is it supply chain transparency or a comprehensive assessment of our product portfolio? It is important to share knowledge and collaborate with other partners in the value chain because only this way we can drive a positive change and contribute to a more sustainable future.
Hi, I'm Caroline Boden, Director of Shareholder Advocacy with Mercy Investment Services. As an asset manager, we actively engage our portfolio companies on material, environmental, and social issues, including chemical management. In this roundtable, I want to highlight some best practice benchmarks, reporting standards, and frameworks that we use to help evaluate companies' commitments to and performance on safer chemical management and to drive progress towards sustainable solutions. These tools help us identify the gaps and areas of improvement in companies' performance on chemical management, which then informs our direct engagements with those companies.
Hi, my name is Ligthart, and I work for ChemSec, an environmental NGO. We help investors better understand how hazardous chemicals can harm their portfolios if not properly addressed by the companies they are invested in. In this panel, I will both talk about how ChemScore compares to other, more generic sustainability rankings, but also touch upon how that directly affects the financial risk for investors. See you there.
So, good morning, everyone. Sustainability is no longer just a corporate goal, but it's becoming a necessity for ensuring business reliance and also continuity and compliance. And today we have the great opportunity to discuss best practices and approaches on sustainability with a broad range of representatives here from industry, investors, and NGOs. And just to kick off the discussion, I would like if you can briefly recall your name, your role in the company, and maybe with one or two sentences just explain what best practices on sustainability means in your specific area of work.
Yes, my name is Ligthart, as you heard on the horrible video that we recorded. I work for ChemSec since almost 18 years now, so I've been doing a lot of things with regard to chemicals policy and lately with investors, which is highly interesting because really connecting the dots on the financial side and the human health side of chemical exposure. I think when I talk about best practices, it's on sustainability, such a wide topic. So I would really like to focus on the safety part of sustainability. And then, if you're going to have future-proof profits, you really need to know what's in your product. So what you have, where it's being used, and the properties of those substances. So that is really the core and essence from my perspective. Thank you.
Thanks. And Beth Uhlhorn, you saw my video, Director of Product Safety and Compliance at Dow. And I've been with Dow for 15 years, based in Philadelphia. And I started with Dow in finance and then moved more into the sustainability area. So really excited about this forum and the idea of bringing kind of the finance aspects, the investment side of things into sustainability and into chemical safety. And in terms of best practices, everything that you said is right. Knowing what's in your products, knowing the impact of your products, and that at Dow comes with having our own in-house toxicology group, and I would say that that is a best practice. We have 80 people in the company who are looking into the safety of our products, and so we put each product that we launch through a pretty rigorous process to make sure that we know what's in it and what its impact is.
Okay, yeah, good morning everyone. My name is Carina. I'm the head of sustainability of the company BYK. So we are specialty chemicals manufacturer and manufacture additives. I'm coming from regulatory, moved into sustainability. So it's really nice to be here and also have the discussion with everyone on this topic. And I can just repeat what both already mentioned. We need to better understand our products and the application where the products are used to better understand what sustainability, what regulatory risk, what also benefits may be applicable to that. And I think that's really very important to focus on. Get all the people together, the regulatory ones, the sustainability ones, the R&D person, even the technical people, right? So we need to establish a common language, a common understanding, so that we get everyone on board. We need somehow to collaborate, even in the organization, along the value chain. And yes, I think that's the very important part.
Great. I love that word, collaborate. So good morning, everybody. I'm Caroline Boden, Director of Shareholder Advocacy with Mercy Investment Services. And I think when, from an investor perspective, when we think about best practices, collaborate is often a word that we're thinking about because we want to understand from company perspective how they're bringing those different teams together, how they're breaking down silos when they're thinking about sustainability, from an innovation perspective, from a growth opportunity perspective. And we really want to understand, as investors, and especially in publicly traded companies, how they are embedding sustainability into their business strategies and decision-making processes. We don't want it to see sustainability as a nice-to-have sort of label that they pull out when it's convenient. We really want it to be core to their business because that's what's going to help drive progress and growth. So that's some of the things that we look for.
Thank you very much. So let's dig a bit into the topic and in particular regarding reporting trends. So measuring and communicating about sustainability is one of the key challenges, and I would like to know a bit your experience in that. Maybe we can start with Jerker, since in ChemSec I know you have active reporting activities about sustainability for companies. So maybe can you share your experience about that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorenzo. Yeah, as you know, there are numerous different sustainability rankings. They're all taking the sustainability in a very broad area, taking all those different aspects into consideration to put a grade on a company. But barely any of them really take into consideration the chemical part of sustainability. It could be maybe 1% or 2% of the total ranking. But it's such an important part when it comes to the financial risk connected to chemicals. It's not really represented in the ESG rankings that we have today. And I think it'd be good if you maybe put on the slide. Oh, it's already there. Great. Because, for example, this is, I don't want to name which sustainability ranking this is, but if you look at 3M, I think everyone agrees that 3M has huge problems with chemical legacy. What is the problems with 3M? Of course, it's the hazardous chemicals they have been producing, are producing, and they have in the product. And this ranking obviously does not take into consideration the chemical part and the chemical risk associated with that. So when we compare to ChemScore that we developed, which only look at the chemical part of big companies, you see they're really in the bottom, 49 out of 51. So this is really the difference when you look and zoom in on one specific topic. And in this case, the chemical risk for consumers, for investors. So this is, and we created ChemScore, and that was a specific request from one of the investors that we are collaborating with in the IIC, Investor Initiative for Hazardous Chemicals. Caroline, she's part of that as well. But they asked us, how can we know which are the worst chemical producers? They want to get out of that risk. So they asked us. And we created ChemScore to be able to say which are the best ones and the worst ones from a chemical perspective, chemical hazard perspective. And I think that is really the essence, that the safety part, as I mentioned in the beginning, that is really key for chemical.
Maybe Beth, Carina, you want to give your view from an industry perspective on these reporting and communication challenges?
Well, thank you for not putting Dow on the screen there. We report against all of these various frameworks, and it's true that some of them are much more specialized and some of them are much more general. I would say that I think we've learned a lot from reporting. It's an effort that, as you go through it as a company, it can seem like, oh my gosh, we want to actually be focused on doing the work and not on communicating it or getting it out there or whatever. But we've found that a lot of the reporting effort ultimately does then drive strategy. And so, I know that in the safer materials space, for example, we've seen where as companies start to disclose more, the ChemScore rankings and things have changed, and we've adopted strategy based on that. So it's very effective, and the specialized ones are probably good at getting to the areas of the company that might then be able to influence strategy related to that particular area.
What I would see is that there are many different kind of rating schemes available outside. So when we check on ChemSec, sorry for that, it's focused on the hazardous potential of substance of concern. You have also what we call Carbon Disclosure Project. This is then focusing on reduction of greenhouse gas emission. You have also EcoVadis that is focused more on a sustainable performance perspective from the plant and manufacturing side. So there's quite a lot that is available, and I think Beth can agree. It's kind of an effort to go through that, to start with the reporting scheme, to understand what is really the requirement from the stakeholder, what do they want to know about us as a company. And we are located in Europe, so we will also deal with the ESG requirements that's just coming up from the Corporate Sustainability Directive. So also here we need to learn and to adapt what are topics from materiality and what do we need to report and what is from interest from the other stakeholders. But what we also do is what's in for us. So it's not just pulling all the data together and just say, okay, that's CDP, that's EcoVadis, that's another scheme, ESG. It's also what we can learn about that. For example, with the EcoVadis assessment, just pick up another rating system. We try to get really the people together that are included in such assessments. So we have the EH&S people, we have the HR people, we have the procurement people that sit together on a table, and then we try to understand what is the requirement, how is sustainability seen from the manufacturing point of view, and what do we need to do to improve afterwards. It's not just giving it into the system and then, okay, checkbox, we have done that. It's also what we can gain out of it to improve ourselves. And that's just a continuously journey, because when you start first time, you do that and maybe, the rating and the result is not what you want for. And maybe also even management is not very happy about that. I mean, that happens, right? But that gives you also the chance to really dive into that and then understand what are the requirements.
So I understand there are different ways of ranking and rating sustainability. So maybe from an investor's point of view, are there any specific rating or ranking that you make a reference to? And how do you relate with companies when they make some commitments and maybe they don't reach that target? Can you explain a bit your view from an investor's perspective?
Absolutely, and there's a few things that I've heard from my fellow panelists that I want to tease out. And Jurger, I'm so glad that you had that slide up that showed sometimes the difference between evaluations from financial rating agencies and very tailored issue-specific benchmarks. So obviously, as an investment organization, we try to take a very comprehensive approach to how we evaluate companies. And from where I sit on our shareholder team of when we're preparing to engage with a company, I try to look at all these different resources. But Jurger, I'm so glad you had that, because I do think that helps to emphasize that, from our perspective, we do look at tools, whether it's MSCI or Sustainalytics and others, these financial rating agencies, but they often don't have the deep expertise on issues, specific issues, whether it's chemical management, whether it's human rights, sometimes even if it's carbon and emissions. And so this is where we have to balance it with other benchmarking and framework systems. So things like ChemScore, or for the retailer sector, we'll look at, there's a benchmark called the Mind the Store Retailer Report Card, which helps us also understand the chemical management processes and approaches within the retail sector. If we're looking at human rights, we might pull things like the Corporate Human Rights Benchmark, or there's resources from World Benchmarking Alliance, and there's so many. It's sort of endless, the benchmarks that you can look at and utilize. But so we try to, bring these all together, take a comprehensive view. We're very sensitive in our engagements with companies that there is benchmarking fatigue. We're very aware of that. So I think we're also trying to encourage companies to identify perhaps the best reporting frameworks and benchmarks out there. And we try to also carefully evaluate so that we have trust in those benchmarking systems. We understand the organizations behind them, whether it's ChemSec or like World Benchmarking Alliance, for instance, so that we have, as an investor, a certain amount of trust and faith in the methodology behind those benchmarks, so that when we're going to companies and having conversations about either where they're performing really well or where there are gaps and opportunities for improvement, we can trust the data behind it. And Beth, to your point of understanding sort of that benchmarking fatigue and feeling like, why do we need to put this out there? Well, let's just do the work. Why do we have to communicate? Obviously, for investors and I think for other stakeholders as well, we can't do our jobs without that data, and we can't make good decisions without it. So I always try to encourage companies, tell your story, because oftentimes when we get into private dialogues with companies, there's great stuff happening behind the scenes. But if you don't tell that story, if you don't communicate it to the public, to your investors, nobody's going to know. And so then sometimes through perhaps third-party benchmarking systems, that's why you might perform poorly. So the more that you can be transparent, I think that helps overall with company performance and certainly from an investor perspective of how we evaluate, how we continue to engage.
So let's move on transparency. This is an important topic that has been quoted several times during the conference and different discussions. It's a pillar to sustainability. It's an enabler. Without transparency, it's difficult to make all information needed to flow along the entire value chain. So this comes also with challenges. Supply chains are complex. We understood that it's not easy to disclose this information. Part is confidential. There is also complexity in the way supply chains are structured. So how do you approach, maybe from an industry perspective, Beth, this transparency issue in your company?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about both sides a little bit, both how we get information from suppliers and then how we communicate information downstream. So getting information from suppliers, obviously the safety data sheet is something that we rely on heavily. But we also have a raw material questionnaire that we send. And I know that probably our suppliers would say, oh, that document is a real pain in the butt. But it's really important for us because it's how we get the more detailed information that might not be available on the SDS. So we ask for that information, and to your point on collaboration across functions, we work really closely with the procurement team, asking them, begging them, please make sure that you get this information from suppliers and that you don't buy the stuff until you have that information from suppliers. So and increasingly, I think other parts of the company are really starting to get on board with that and are starting to, voluntarily make sure that suppliers are giving that information. And then in terms of communicating to our customers, again, I would say, the safety data sheet is the best way to communicate safety information, the most important way to communicate safety information. But we supplement that with, we have regulatory data sheets. Many folks in the chemical industry have regulatory data sheets, and that's the more voluntary information that we put out about our products. And those things, both our SDSs and our RDSs, are available on our website. And so, people can go, and particularly customers, can go and look up the product that they're looking to buy and find the majority of the information that they would need about that product through those documents, as well as, increasingly on Dow.com, we're putting other things like certifications and stuff right there in association with the product. So really trying to communicate as much as we can in a way that allows our customers and the general public to self-serve and find all of the information that they need there. And then, I would say our customers also give us those questionnaires that we need to then fill out, just like we ask our suppliers. And we're seeing more direct questions from them about certain substances, about certain regulations, about things like the sourcing of bio-based materials and where they're coming from. And so transparency, definitely a trend that is not going away, and moving into new areas all the time.
And beside these increasing trends of increasing the flow of information that is passed through the supply chain, we are also observing more and more collaboration and synergies between players in the supply chain. And Carina, in your introductory video, you talked about sharing knowledge and experience in the value chain from a perspective of assessing product portfolio. Can you elaborate a bit more on that concept?
Maybe I will just shortly come back to Beth, because I could just copy what she said. I mean, it's the same. We have the raw material questionnaire. We're reaching out to supplier to collect the information. Our customers approach us. We have an additional sheet next to the safety data sheet to provide more information than the safety data sheet, right? I think to be very honest, is kind of a topic we need to work on, how we transfer the data. We are still document based, so we provide PDF documents. We are not very digitalized in that way. I think that's a great opportunity to use really new technology to make it easy accessible. Because also when you see, it's not only customers approach us with their questionnaire, it's also that we receive a lot of questions to put in data into databases, own design databases from even, let's say, automotive industry. I take just this as example. They have a database where they put all the information into that to do the evaluation assessment. But they are focused on parts, not on chemicals. It's very hard for us to get the right data into the system because they are not used to collaborate with us in a supply chain as we are chemical producer. And we have kind of a lot of such databases where we should be able to provide data, but we cannot do that in a proper way because we're talking about chemicals and not parts that are baby interest for automotive. So that is when it comes to collaboration and transparency. We are very at the beginning of the supply chain, but nevertheless, we try to reach out to brand owners as well, to customer to get into dialogue and talk about that. Also that we try to explain, okay, we are a chemical producer. We cannot just, we don't sell a part to your business, right? We need different information, and maybe you need different information from us. But it's a step-by-step process. And when it comes to sustainability, you have the raw material questionnaires, and now a lot of our customers add a different section that they call sustainability. So they now start to collect data about bio-based measurement, life cycle assessment, product carbon footprint. So you see that the value chain is picking up the topics even if we have maybe not a standardized way to communicate. And therefore, you start to see increasing transparency, but nevertheless, we need to talk. Because when we, for example, talk about biobase, there's different analytical methodology available outside how to measure it from the product. So therefore, we need to get more standardized way how to communicate and then provide data along the value chain. Because at the moment, we just try as best as we can, I would say. So we need also more guidance in that direction, what is really required. And what we also do is our editors are used in many, many different application areas. So we really reach out to the customer to get a better understanding about where do you use our products, in which kind of application areas. I think at the past, when I started, just coming from university in the chemical industry, no, we don't talk about that. That's confidential information. But you see now that in the value chain, the people start to talk about it because we need to better understand the application areas to then also identify what are our action points and how do we need to improve our chemicals in respect to sustainability. Yeah, and that's, I think, a process that just started and where we just need to continuously stay in dialogue. And on the procurement side, I think we need to learn a lot still how to approach our suppliers in that respect. We have maybe not, we are not as big as Dow, for example, so we don't have, like, say, the power to also go to the suppliers and explain what we need to process it on. Huh? So a lot of suppliers you are very small customer for us. So therefore, we also need to try, I think, much harder to address what we need to then process also data along the value chain.
So now let's move on the risk management side. And there is this never-ending debate between hazard versus risk-based approach. Many diverging views, a lot of fighting discussions on which path should be followed, maybe something in between. So let's talk a bit more about that, and maybe we can start with Jürgen from ChemSec. You are one of the big fighters for replacing substances regardless the risk level, right? So can you talk about that?
I don't think it will come as a surprise to you or anyone here in the room that if I'm in the risk corner or the hazard-based corner, of course, we always see the hazard-based approach as the best one. It's always the most efficient. Not always, but very, very often it's the most efficient way. Because you can't really control the risk as soon as a product leaves the gates of your factory. You're not in control of that product anymore. So you can't really control how it's being used and so on. And we often hear that, the lion is in the cage. Yeah, the lion is in the cage, but you're giving out the keys to everyone. Every single person using that product has a key to that product, or a key to that cage. So the lion is in the cage, but anyone can unlock the cage. And for example, would you be willing to lock your own home? You lock it, a very strong lock. And then you go home. There's no risk for burglary. No one can break in there because it's a strong lock. And then you just walk on the street handing out keys to strangers, random strangers, with the address on your home. Do you really think that is there a risk to have a burglar in your home or not? How many keys are you willing to hand out before, now it's too much? I think that is kind of the way you have to think when you're talking about risk and hazard. And also if you're looking at, for example, persistent chemical or bioaccumulative chemicals, that it also, because even if it's very, very minute right now, persistence makes that it can accumulate over time. If it's bioaccumulative, then it also increases in the body or in the food chain or in nature. So if you want a circular economy, you certainly cannot deal with risk only. Because if you're doing the risk analysis, you're taking the glass analogy from yesterday. Okay, we have a crystal vase with a lot of lead in it. That's glass, lead, boron, a lot of nice stuff. You recycle that, put that in that it's been recycled, been mixed with other glass. So, and next life, maybe it's a vase again, no big deal. In the third life, maybe it becomes a glass for children to drink. Could be orange juice, could be Coca-Cola, probably. And then you'll have an issue. And you didn't know that two life cycles ago that it would end up in a glass. So this is the big problem with the risk-based approach if you don't face up the hazard from the start. So the ball is on your side.
Yeah. No. So I actually, as I'm listening to you, what I'm thinking about is that really this discussion, it's not so much two camps as a Venn diagram, right? And I think that there's a lot of overlap in what we would both say. It's that risk matters, but that you need to understand a lot of things in order to manage that risk. You need to maybe know those people that you're giving that key to your house to. And so, I would say that it's incumbent then upon the chemical industry, where if we're putting forward a risk-based management approach, which we absolutely are, that then we work to understand the uses and applications of our products, that we work to audit customers that might be handling higher hazard products, that we work to undertake some of the measures that would give both society, governments, NGOs, et cetera, and ourselves greater confidence that our home isn't going to be broken into. So I think we agree actually on a lot, just maybe not that you need to get to the elimination of chemistry in order to manage that risk.
And from an investor's point of view, how do you consider these lions in the cage that we're...
Yeah, I love that analogy. So first I want to sort of maybe emphasize, because at Mercy Investment Services, we're a faith-based asset manager. So part of our strategy is really marrying both how we consider material risks, financial materiality, with the moral imperative that we have from the sisters, our client, and so how we're trying to protect consumers, communities, and the planet. And so our approach has been more, Beth, I do agree with you that it's maybe sort of less two distinct camps and there's a lot of overlap, but our position has been more in favor of a hazards-based approach. And I think that's partly because we see risk-based approaches, that's compliance, and that should be the floor. From our perspective, a hazard-based approach is really the gold standard, and we do want to see companies, Beth, you're absolutely right, that you have to consider risk and those exposures, but we also want to understand how companies, whether it's a chemical producer, a consumer goods company, or retailer with their own private label products, how they're understanding the intrinsic hazard characteristics and qualities of the chemicals and the raw materials used within their products. And Jurker, I'm glad that you brought up the sort of point around circularity. When we're also having conversations around that, we're really advocating with companies, and again, this is really across the value chain, circularity needs to be not just decarbonizing, but detoxifying as much as possible. Those two have to go together. And there's also, again, sort of from our perspective, this we feel that you can't really achieve full decarbonization without also working towards detoxification, that those two can work together. I think another sort of perspective that we have, and again, maybe this is coming a little bit from that faith perspective, when I'm engaging companies around chemicals management, certainly there's some technical aspects that we're considering. I also try to take a comprehensive approach. So I'm bringing in questions around human rights, environmental justice, cumulative impact on communities. And so this is where sometimes I get concerned that a risk-based approach is only as good as the regulations behind it that protect consumers and the environment. And I think in some markets, there's really good regulations to support that. Again, a hazard-based approach would be going beyond compliance. I think where we're at now in some markets, I won't name any specific countries, but we're seeing a rollback of some of those regulatory protections. So when I go to companies, then my question would be, how are you thinking beyond that? Because those protections may not be enough, and therefore a risk-based approach may not be sufficient. And then there's certainly, it can bring in perspective around how a risk-based approach may then expose companies to financial risk through litigation, reputational damage through if they lose consumer trust. So it is really about balancing those two things and ideally striving for that gold standard as much as possible.
Yeah. I think we could stay talk about this topic for hours, but unfortunately we have limited time. And there is one last point I would like to touch is about organizational challenges within companies. We see that more and more there is the need for different departments to start collaborating more and more. For example, just look about digital passport. You need to compile a lot of information from different areas in a single place. It's also about communication. So how are you addressing this challenge in the industry? Maybe, Beth, if you can give a quick highlight of how you address that and how you see this in the future. Is this something that is growing? Are you able to address these challenges?
I think, what I'd like to talk about here with Dow is our safer materials strategy and looking at kind of how with our last set of 10-year goals, EH&S really drove the development of those goals and, kind of decided what the goals would be. And now what we're seeing is that it is a much, much more collaborative effort. And also, frankly, driven from the top. My CEO is excellent in that regard. But particularly on the safer materials side, what we've seen is this incredible collaboration between R&D and our EH&S group, our product safety group, to the point where, there are communities of practice set up that are R&D leaders and our product safety leaders coming together and discussing the strategy and the challenges, and also R&D from one business discussing with R&D from another business, where the one business comes with maybe a material that is a challenged material, and another business coming with a solution. So we've really seen the collaboration across the company step up with regard to sustainability and sustainability goals and challenges.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes left. We can see if there is any question from the floor.
Hi, I'm Cheryl, and I'm a former investor relations officer, so this is very interesting to me. Question, how do you, Dow sounds like an amazing company, collaborate together. How do you get the troops, do all the tactical stuff that's needed to fulfill all the reporting and all the forms and all the financials that need to do, that you have to supply to finance to put in all the financials? How do you do that? You mentioned the CEOs in there from the beginning, but how do you do that?
Yeah, so our setup, that is also something that has changed a lot over the last few years. We went from having one dedicated ESG reporter for the whole company who really, she wrote it A to Z. And we went from that to an approach where there are, I think, 4 or 5 folks who are focused on actually becoming the experts on the standards, right? And then they reach out into literally hundreds to thousands of us across the company to actually write all of the chapters and things for them that then is centrally aggregated and shared with all of these different, reported against all of these different frameworks. So we have the few folks who are the experts on the frameworks and the many who contribute the content. And it's a massive coordination effort. And, I've watched the reporting team, last year, to their credit, they did kind of a survey midway through the process and at the end of the process about, how can we improve efficiency, communication, et cetera. And so they're constantly learning, changing, growing, and getting better. But it's something that, it's amazing how it pulls on the whole company now and everybody has to be aligned. So, yeah, it's been a real change. I don't know, do you have anything that you want to?
We are not that big, right? We are a little bit smaller as a company. So we can, it's easier, let's say, to get in contact with the different departments and colleagues who need to be involved. I think what we are now doing is we really try to get our colleagues from controlling and finance more into the topic. So really to approach them and say, hey, sustainability is also a topic for you. It's not just a topic for us, because usually when you talk about the KPIs from the EH&S department, they are very familiar with water, hazardous waste, energy, whatever, but our controlling are focused on finance. This will shift, of course, with the European regulation now. So we need to get our controller on board, our finance people, to really say, okay, that's a topic for you in future. We have new KPIs, there are different KPIs, there are product-related KPIs. We need to come along. We need to get used to it. You need to be part of that. I think that's what's going on at the moment in our company, that we really get different departments then on board, and it's just not the reporting team that has done the reporting since ever, wrote the chapters and collect the data together, also to include new departments now to get the requirements done. Yeah.
I wrote it. It was like a 10-page document. I was trying to get ISO certificates in other countries in Malaysia, and it was just nuts.
Thank you all for a great discussion. I'm Allie McPherson. I direct the Investor Environmental Health Network for Clean Production Action. I recently spent quite a bit of time in Africa where the lion was not in the cage at all, and I was really grateful our guides took a hazard-based approach, because they said 9 times out of 10 that lion sleeping won't get up, but they're very unpredictable and they're very opportunistic. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are, maybe particularly to you, Beth, on chemicals that are persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic, carcinogenic, mutagenic, reproductive toxins, PBTs, CMRs. Because I think they're very unpredictable, and we haven't shown any case examples where they're well controlled. So does it change the decision-making for a company like Dow when they are inherently toxic, highly carcinogenic? That's, I think, one thing I'd love your perspective on.
Yeah, I think this probably fits in that Venn diagram of agreement. I think, we would want to think about the use for that particular thing. But if I think about, we have this safer materials characterization of our products, and all of those hazards that you named would be our priority 1 hazards. And so then, if they were used in any sort of dispersive or less controlled use, they would be in that category where they would be candidates for replacement. I think, where it gets trickier is if they're in a more controlled industrial and intermediate use. And I think, you started with bringing up this point of regionality. And that's something that, I think we did not bring regionality into our framework. We very purposely said we want a global approach to things. But we've had some feedback that, hey, when you say industrial, it's different if you say industrial in, the global north versus the global south, maybe. And so it's something that I think, maybe we've got to think about. And that might be an aspect that we bring more into our safer materials strategy as we go forward.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I think we have just 2 minutes left. I would like to ask you to express one takeaway, one sentence that for you it's important for companies to prioritize. We have seen that there are many different challenges, many different areas where we could work on. One sentence, what should a company prioritize to accelerate their path toward sustainability?
I think the most important part, if we just say one thing, I think it's about transparency. Because it's obvious, like you're kicking on your suppliers to get what you want, and you're kicking on Dow to get what you want from them. And if I would be investing, I would want to know where is my money going. So you have to be transparent against me. So I think it's the information flow all the way from the chemical producer, because that is where the information comes from. That is the source, and that has to be transparent all the way until So I know where I will place my money, so she can place her money in the right company that I would support. So transparency.
So increasing transparency. Beth?
I think it's dialogue, because I think that, there are a lot of areas where we agree, even if there might be some areas where we disagree. And I think that, the more that we try to say two camps or, those kinds of things, the less progress we make. So more dialogue is what I would suggest.
I would go for collaboration. So next to transparency and dialogue, then we need to start to work with each other. We open up along the value chain, get to know what is the perspective, what information is needed, and then start working together.
Oh goodness, I feel like I just want to echo all of that. I think transparency is definitely a key thing that we're looking for, but you sort of stole my thunder on that, so I'll just echo agreement with everything that's been shared already.
Perfect. So transparency, dialogue, and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Today we had a very interesting roundtable discussion about sustainability on best practices and approaches. We had representatives in the panel from industry, NGOs, and as well investors. We discussed about very interesting topics, such as how to measure sustainability, how to report it, which system of rating can be used also by investors for evaluating companies. We then touched the topics about sustainability and transparency, and how to communicate in the supply chain, as well as the very hot topic and long-term discussion about hazard versus risk-based management of chemicals. And we also touched the topic about changes in the organizations, and in particular how sustainability requirements are increasing the type of synergies and cooperation between departments within companies that in a rate that was not previously seen. And the key message and the recommendation as a conclusion of the discussion was to push for transparency, dialogue, and cooperation in the supply chain.